Hey guys, so this is a build for my Duchess tank. It's a 20-gallon long tank that I originally wanted to use for as my grow out tank. But I decided, hey, it looked good here, so let's set this up, do a little kind of mini Dutch style tank. No hardscape, mainly plants, trying to get it grow really bushy and full. So this is the build video up to 4-week update, so check it out. So let's start with all the stuff we'll be doing this build with. First, a quick disclaimer, which is that throughout this whole build and the 4 weeks of updates, there's tons of changes that's being made to this build, as I'm trying and testing different things with it all the time. This goes for the plants that I'm using as well. We're using a 20-gallon long tank for this, and I've slid a black post-it board for the background of the tank. I didn't actually get around to painting it black before I started to set it up, so I can do that later if needed. For lighting, I'm using an AH Supply lighting fixture for a 55-watt compact fluorescent rated at 6700 kelvins. The hood I whipped up together really quickly. For CO2 diffusion, I will be using an Insta Min Max CO2 reactor. Later on, I actually changed this to an inline diffuser that I got from Greenleaf Aquarium, which I like much better. And well, I'll explain later why I just didn't like the Max Min reactor. For filtration, we'll be sporting a Sun 603B canister filter. I use lava rocks as my biomedia, and the coarse and fine sponge that came with the filter as my mechanical filtration. From the start, I had the feeling that the pump wouldn't be strong enough for both the flow and to work the reactor, so I bought an inline pump, which was coming in the mail during the time of this recording. You'll see me switch it out later. In anticipation of not getting enough flow, I picked up a Hygrophila nano circulation pump. I got the one that runs about 240 GPH. Later, when I installed the new pump, I ended up removing this from the tank as it wasn't needed. I got an Insta CO2 drop checker. I ended up just switching it out later for your typical made in Taiwan glass drop checker. I'll be using a CO2 paintball canister with my really old regulator. And finally, for substrate, I'll be using fluorite black sand, which I will use as a cap over Eco Complete. This bag of Eco Complete I've had sitting around for more than 13 years. I wrote Carbocy and they said that I could still use it as long as I rinsed it. But if I did that, I won't be able to use the quote-unquote beneficial bacteria to jumpstart cycle the tank, which is fine, I didn't need that anyways. And for the heater, I'll be using the Tetra HT30, and I'll probably switch this out later on. I'll just get a new heater later. As I mentioned in another video, I really do not like these heaters. So we'll start by adding the substrate to the tank. I give the Eco Complete a really nice rinsing. Normally you don't need to do this for the substrate and be able to just scoop it out and into the tank. But as I said earlier, it's 13 plus years old, so the beneficial bacteria that came with its bag most likely died out. I then capped it with fluorite black sand. Now this I rinsed the heck out of for an hour, and as you will be able to tell later, it still wasn't enough. This is the first time I've used fluorite, but it will be the last time, as I did not like the prep time needed to use the substrate. I normally do planted tanks, so I need a tank to be clear right off the bat for planting, so I'll stick with Eco Complete or 88 Aqua Soil. I would foresee you spending time to rinse out sand if I were to use it as a cap, but that's as far as I would go for prepping substrate. Another disclaimer, when I ordered the plants they came in 2 days earlier than I expected, so instead of just leaving them in the bags in room temperature, I put them in my refrigerator. Long story short, it's a brand new refrigerator and I had it set way too cold, so some of the plants didn't make it. It was a pretty dumb mistake, but hey, it's something to learn from, right? First plant we'll be planting down is the Staurogyne repens. I originally planned to use them as a carpeting plant for the foreground. It came in pots, so I prepped the plants simply by removing it from the pots, separating them from the root sponges, and then separating them into stems itself, and then planting them into the substrates as you see here. Here we'll add a group of Blyxa japonica from my grow out tank. On the other end of the tank, we'll add a group of Dwarf Sagittaria. And behind the Dwarf Sagittaria, we'll add a clump of Cryptocoryne wendtii reds. Here we're adding Anubias, barteri, and nanas. Now these should be tied to rocks or driftwoods, but I didn't do that here for some reason or the other. I don't remember why. I did end up taking them out later. The rest of the plants are mainly stem plants, so I started to add the rest of the water to the tank. The water is from my tap and conditioned with API tap water conditioner. I had the water directed to a container lid so as not to disturb the substrate. Now here's the problem I was having with the cloudy water from the fluorite substrate. The water settles after a day or two, but I cannot see where I was planting. So the video of planting the rest of the plants I didn't record, as you wouldn't be able to see anything anyways. We'll go over the plant setup after the water clears up after a day. Setting up the filter and the CO2 reactor was a simple, straightforward step. I did run into some problems. The outlet of the filter did not fit on the rim of my tank, so I ended up sawing a small notch in the frame with a handheld hacksaw. After connecting the CO2 reactor to the filter, I filled up the filter with water. You have to be careful with this model of the Sun filter, as the plastic is pretty flimsy and brittle, so use a little finesse when dealing with this model. The larger Sun's filter seems to be better built, but for the price and size of these filters, it's hard to pass up on. On the CO2 inlet line, I added a check valve so no water will back siphon into the CO2 setup. This is one of the problems with the CO2 reactor. Once hooked up and the filter is running, it did not push enough water flow for the propellers on the reactor to work very well. So I had to set up an inline CO2 diffuser in the tank until the new pump comes in. So here's the tank after a few hours. I'll go over the midground and background plants in the tank, as I've already explained the foreground plants. Behind the Dwarf Sag and to the right of the Cryptocorynes is a bunch of Ludwigia repens. You can barely see them here, but it's the plant with the reddish leaves. The reddish plant behind the Blyxas are the Ammannia gracilis. Sorry, I'm going to butcher these names. Behind them in the corner are the Wisteria. Now the Wisteria surprisingly did not make it from the freeze. Next to the Wisterias are Rotala indica from my grow out tank. Later I added more to the bunch. The next bunch of plants are the Mayaca fluviatilis. Then we have the Cabomba, which I believe is the caroliniana species. Then we have the Hygrophila Salicifolia narrow leaves. The next bunch over is one of my favorites, the Rotala Wisteria. The bunch hiding behind the cryptos are the Ludwigia peruensis glandulosa, which unfortunately did not make it either. It just melted into slime after a week or two. And finally in the corner we have an Amazon sword. This I ended up taking out as it melted back, and I found that it just didn't fit in the low tank. So I trimmed out the leaves and put it into my grow out tank. Here's a better look at the tank as a whole after a couple of days. In the next 4 weeks there's been a bunch of changes made both to the equipment and the plants. Let's check it out. couple of days after setting up the tank, the new pump came in. I got an Echo Plus 264 submersible pump which runs at 290 GPH. I don't need that much flow, but I was able to control that with the Sunsense cutoff valve at the filter intake. To hook up the pump, I had another Sunsense cutoff valve from another 603 filter I had and connected that to the filter outtake and from there to the pump using a 3/4 inch hose, then to the reactor and then to the tank. After a week, the plants had started to grow in slowly. I added 2 of my Danios from the grow-out tank to help cycle this tank. Also moved the Rotala indica to the other side of the Cabomba and threw out the Ludwigia peruensis as it melted really badly. As you can tell here as well, the Wisteria on the right corner has started to wither down. Here's the tank at the 2-week mark. I also visited Jacob's Aquarium over the weekend for his grand opening and picked up a couple more plants. I did change some plants up again, so let's go over that really quick. In the corner here, I took out the Amazon swords as I found the plant is just too big for this tank. It didn't quite fit the scale of it all. In its place, I added some kind of Alternatheria. In its corner, I stuck in a bunch of baby tears as a bunch and added more Ludwigia repens. Later, I would move them to the other side of the tank with the other group of repens as both bunches started to melt back a little. There was also a leak in my old regulator, so I switched out the CO2 setup with the setup I had on hand for my Iwagumi tank. Since that tank is still dry starting, I would be able to just get up a new setup for that tank when I'm ready to flood that tank. I'm also not liking this reactor. It doesn't seem to work very well, and if I push more CO2 into it, it just creates an air pocket. So I decided to place an order for an inline diffuser with green leaf aquariums to see if that works a little better. I also changed out the lighting. As the original lighting I had worked very well, it was just too bulky and got in the way when I worked on the tank. So I put in an order for Phoenix Planet Plus LED lights and installed that. This worked way better for me. However, both lighting is causing me algae problems from them being so low in the tank, so it's giving off really intense lighting at the substrate level. So I'll be raising the lights in the near future once the light risers get in. We're into our 3rd week with the tank now. I was having some problems with the CO2 as I couldn't get the inline diffuser working correctly. I figured out that I had to make some minor adjustments to my outgoing PSIs, as this is a type of inline diffuser that requires high PSI output to work. Once that was fixed, I ramped up the CO2 and played around with it for a few days. I took out my Danios out from the tank as not to gas them to death. I'll just let the tank cycle fishless from here on out, as I will be working more on the plants for the next few weeks. I started an EI dosing regimen to this tank. In addition to fertilization, I made a bunch of DIY root tablets using Osmocote Plus and Dr. Iron and planted them into the substrate. The algae problem is still there, as you can see. I'm getting string algae, but I'm not really worried about it too much. I'll just pick at it when I have time, but it's to be expected when establishing a tank, and especially with my lighting situation. It should go away later as the tank gets balanced out and I introduce some livestock to help clean up the algae. I give the plants a nice trimming. This is going to happen a couple more times in the next few weeks as to get the bunches to grow out fuller. For plants, I've also added 2 new types. Here I'm adding in Scarlet Temples. I took out the baby tier bunch and stuck it in my grow out tank for now. In this other corner, I added a group of Hygrophila lancea. And that's where we come to the 4th week. So currently this is what the tank looks like in 4 weeks. I just did a water change last night, and I'm going to go over really quick what I'm planning to do for the next, coming weeks. But again, plans are always, changing, especially with this tank. I'm doing a lot of experimentation. So let's check it out. So what you didn't see here, which I didn't film yet, which I done yesterday after the watching, was move all my S repens over to this side. And that'll be my carpeting of S repens here. Got a little patch of HC growing here, and I'm thinking about getting more to make a path going up down the back there towards the middle of the tank, where this plant that I can never identify, I have to figure out what they are. Just have a patch of it just growing here. Kind of have a little metal type of thing. And on this side of it, I'm planning to go ahead and just grow baby tears. I'll carpet the baby tears over here. So you got like two styles of carpets growing. Next plant, I actually want to take out the Cryptocorynes. I love the Cryptocorynes, love the color, and they're growing really, really crazy in this tank. The problem is that they're going to grow really big. They're already bushing out now, and it's supposed to be a foreground plant that I'm trying to do with it. But it's just going to outgrow this tank. So I'm going to take it out, throw it in the grow out tank later, and I'll use it for my 60-gallon tank that I'm going to set up later. And then I'll go ahead and move these red plants over to where the Cryptocoryne is, and that's where I would open the area for the metal, the HC meadow. I ordered another bunch of the Scarlet Temples. I want to fill that out a little. It's a little bare there. So another bunch should fill it out a bit. Here in the back, I ordered another bunch of Rotala, or whatever it's called. Just to fill it out a little bit. Now the Cabomba here, it's really weirdly trimmed, and it was because I was a little, impatient and just trimmed it before I should have. I should have let it grow more than trim it so that it could be evened out. So I'm probably just going to go to my local fish store. I know they sell them there, and buy another bunch and just kind of, even it out a bit so that it'll grow at the same time. And then just let it bunch out as I trim it. But yeah, that's it. More updates to come about this tank, and you'll see how it grows out, and hopefully how it grows out. And we'll see how it does. So again, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. Like this video if you like how this tank is going. And I will talk at you guys later.